Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with Dr. Jessie Mahoney.
And Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are physicians and leaders who are also trained in coaching, yoga, mindfulness, and integrative medicine.
We are also mothers, spouses, sisters, daughters, aunts, and friends.
In this podcast, we share candid, heart-centered, loving, science-based, thoughtful, and often fun conversations about the challenges life throws at us.
With our collective experience of over 30 years in physician and personal wellness, we reflect and offer pearls of wisdom for navigating life's challenges with more ease.
From parenting, marriages, money scarcity, cancer survivorship, uncertainty, challenges in practicing medicine, we cover it all.
We invite you to refresh your perspective and empower yourself with mindset, mindfulness, and other well-being tools that actually work. A quick reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice.
Welcome to episode number 250. Unbelievable. Today's episode is From Scarcity to Self-Worth, Why Physicians Struggle to Charge with Their Worth, and How to Unlearn the Guilt. Unlearning guilt, self-sacrifice, and scarcity is the path to sustainability in medicine, whether you're in private practice, in entrepreneurship, and beyond. Today's episode was inspired by two moments in the last few weeks. The first one, a pediatrician in my Transition Well group emailed me saying, I know I'm providing life-changing care, but when I consider charging fair prices, I feel guilty. How do I charge what I'm worth and what's even sustainable without feeling terrible? This doc was opening up her own clinic and setting her own rates and was deeply struggling with the idea of what was fair for her clients and for herself. She was noticing her desire to undercharge, to charge below market rate, to give people deals, and recognized that this came from fear of not potentially getting future clients and patients, and guilt that families might have to pay out of pocket and who might not be able to afford it, and that she should be available and accessible to everyone. Her questions are full of heart, full of honesty. How do you value your time and clinical expertise? What if you were to overcharge? What if you were to undercharge? How do you figure out what to charge? And how do you feel comfortable with whatever you choose? The second piece that I want to talk about in this podcast is my own experience with speaking to a physician leadership team this morning. They invited me to come and say in 10 minutes why my keynote talk, The School of Unlearning, was worth it. Why would it make change? Why does it make a difference? And it wasn't about challenging me. They were actually being good stewards. As all physicians, they're trained to be skeptical. They're trained to be cautious. They're trained to be mindful with both time and money. And what I realized is that even with my resume and my years of coaching experience and evidence of significant impact from this talk, given this talk across the country over the last few years and gotten rave reviews, it still felt hard to go and say, this talk matters, it works, and it's worth paying for. And while they didn't ask me specifically to do that, that was my interpretation. And it was my interpretation, even though I knew that they valued what I had to offer. It was difficult for me to say what I have to offer is of value. And it was really all about me. Interestingly, and is that at the end of the pitch that I gave this morning about why it's a good talk and just explaining about myself and the process and why I do what I do, the questions that I actually got were much better than I could have expected. Well, what do we do after the talk? How do we carry forth this work? How do we make changes going forward in the future for our physicians. That's better than I could have ever imagined. And so what felt uncomfortable at first was actually a golden opportunity to see the value that I provide, the worth of what I have to offer, and an opportunity to make an even bigger difference. And that's what I really want to talk about today is our discomfort with valuing ourselves and our self-worth, and our discomfort with saying it and being open and visible about it actually lessens our impact. And that when we show up boldly and bravely, we actually help our patients do better, we help physicians do better, and we make a much bigger impact, which is why most of us are in this work to begin with. So both of these experiences lead back to this same truth, that as physicians, we were taught to undervalue ourselves, or really not value ourselves at all. Our value is in our service to others. And when I trained, we were not there to earn any money. It was really a calling that did not need remuneration. So today I want to talk about this. How can we value ourselves? How can we connect with our worth? And what can happen when we do? And I hope to offer you guys a few tools for unlearning this deep-rooted conditioning that it's not okay to value yourself. It's not okay to be visible, and it's not okay to share what value you bring and the worth you bring, whether it's with patients or your institutions or your organizations. And that when we do, we can step into both sustainability and alignment. We get back to peace, purpose, passion, and possibility. So at the outset, let's just pause and take a big deep breath, as conversations about money stress out almost every physician I know. Conversations about scarcity stress out almost everyone I know, and especially in this moment in time. Taking in a big deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Closing eyes if it's safe to do so, and just giving yourself a moment to drop into your body and notice and acknowledge any resistance or tension that comes up with this conversation. Noticing if feelings of guilt or judgment are floating through. Noticing chest pressure, lumps in your throat, allowing them all to be there just as they are. You haven't done anything wrong to this point. You're unlikely to do anything wrong going forward. Almost every physician I know is a reasonable human being who wants to do good things in the world and make a difference. And you do too. So opening eyes if they're closed and coming back into your listening aware space. I will begin by talking about scarcity as medicine's default mindset. Every conversation we have in medicine is about scarcity of resources, scarcity of time, scarcity of support, scarcity of help, scarcity of recognition. And pediatrics, which is my specialty, is the worst. We have so much scarcity in pediatrics, and we are the lowest, I believe, paid specialty, and it's not an accident. So in peds, we were taught to serve, to sacrifice, and to be silent. And that what we were there to do is take care of children. And that's our duty, obligation, and that even feeling like you should be paid for it was wrong when I graduated from medical school. And how we show up around this is that we judge other people. So if they have a successful practice or if they have abundance, we usually decide it's their spouse that's bringing in the finances, or maybe they're independently wealthy. And we really make a lot of judgments around money in pediatrics. You shouldn't be concerned about it. And yet many, many, many pediatricians barely struggle to get by. And scarcity also shows up in peds as guilt. It shows up as fear. It shows up as martyrdom. And We are a group that is really grounded in self-sacrifice and martyrdom. We have a tremendous amount of guilt at baseline, and we do have a fear of disappointing people, of being judged, and we actually tend to be, as a result, a somewhat judgy group. And I think it's just worth noting because I was raised in pediatrics to think we were the nicest. And what I have learned is that some of these default thought patterns, scarcity, and also the judgment, and also the self-sacrifice, and the martyrdom, and the savior syndrome, and the rescuer syndrome, they actually show up the most prominently in pediatrics. And in pediatrics, because of that, we have actually allowed ourselves to be paid less. We've never spoken up. We don't speak up about our value. We're silent, and therefore we continue to be paid the least. But scarcity shows up in every specialty in medicine. I don't know a physician who feels like they are valued enough. Almost every physician I know has some degree of struggle with their self-worth, worries what other people will think about them. And what I know is that scarcity and this deep-rooted sense of scarcity mindset in medicine has not made medicine successful. Medicine is certainly in a very difficult time. It hasn't made pediatricians successful. And it doesn't really make anyone successful. Coming from scarcity mindset is coming from the negativity bias and what you don't have. It keeps you out of possibility. It keeps you out of creativity. It keeps you, as we talk about often in this podcast, in flight or flight, which is where we don't have our best solutions or answers. So real transformation starts when you step out of scarcity mindset. Now, you don't have to get all the way to abundance mindset, because I also know very few people in medicine who have a true abundance mindset. But we can believe in our self-worth. We can believe in what our expertise, and we can believe in the value that we bring. And when we do that, we actually also have to acknowledge that if you are bringing worth and value and expertise, that does have a monetary value. And if we don't ask other people to contribute in some way, that's where our expertise, value, and worth get devalued. That's what's happened in pediatrics, and it's happened across medicine, honestly. So people pay what we tell them we're worth. And when people don't pay, they actually don't value whatever they get as much. In fact, they tend to not show up, and they don't speak as highly of it. There's actually quite a few studies around this. So when you charge more, people actually perceive more value. They actually go all in. They say, well, I've paid for this, so I'm going to show up and I'm going to do the work, whether it is to lose weight or stop smoking, or make changes. So many people who work, for example, with a concierge doctor, it's not just because they have a lot of money, it's because they value what's being offered, and they're valuing themselves, and they're investing in it with their money. So they're going to invest in it with their time and their effort as well. So when there's a higher investment, there's very often a higher compliance. There's very often a higher level of respect, and very often actually better outcomes. Now, this doesn't mean that charging more is the panacea of all. And I think that it also has to be something that's very much in alignment and feels authentic. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But if people are always get sort of free this and free that, they tend to not value it. So I want to point out that charging fairly is not greedy. It's grounded. It's also sustainable. Charging fairly means that you can continue to do the work that you do. You can pay your mortgage, you can feed your children. And this is actually an issue for many pediatricians. And so recognizing that sustainability in medicine is literally the highest bar. We need to be able to stay in practice. I need to be able to continue coaching people. People need to be able to continue seeing patients. They need to be able to pay their mortgage. They need to be able to pay their staff. And so while we have this idea of money that is taboo, recognizing that a sustainable practice, both financially and energetically, is the highest bar. And I like to think of sustainability not as a low bar, which It used to kind of be like, oh, it's just sustainable. It's actually the highest bar. Think about sustainability for our planet and moving through the world in a green, quote unquote, way. That those practices are more sustainable. And that is actually an incredibly high bar and something to aspire to. So I also want to comment on this idea that there will be people who can't or won't work with you always, and that's okay. Many of us think that everyone needs to be able to work with us and should want to work with us, but we can't work with everyone, and we don't want to work with everyone. And that while we're trained to sort of think of scarcity mindset, like patients won't come, there's actually no scarcity of people who need what each and every one of you offer. And this is true whether you are a hairdresser or a physician or a dog groomer, for example. Our dog groomer for our old dog used to have a tremendous wait. Dentists have a tremendous wait. And yet we're always worried in medicine about scarcity mindset. So there will always be people who need your care. There will always be people who need and want what you have to offer. And if there is someone who can't afford it or doesn't have the resources, if you work for yourself, you can always offer something pro bono or offer a gift, or you can always go work in a free clinic. You can always go do health fairs. There's so many other ways to give back. And I think we often bring to this decision about what to charge and what's fair, we really make it black and white. And so remembering that it is not black and white, it's not all or none. There are lots of different ways to show up. Many people who work in a FQHC, for example, federally qualified health center, they often say, well, I made my decision to commit to this population. And my thought is you can do that. And you can do other things. We are not only one thing. We don't only work in one place for a career. It used to be much more so that way in medicine, but these days you can do many things. You can contribute in lots of ways. And from the pediatric perspective, I love to bring this notion in that every child is worthy of care. No child is more or less worthy of care. Every child is worthy of care. And I believe that every human is worthy of care. But that doesn't mean that each and every one of us can serve each and every human no matter what. It's a little bit like this idea of no boundaries, and then nobody gets anything good because everyone is struggling and suffering and drowning. So the pivot here, I believe, is from self-sacrifice to self-worth. We default to overgiving, people pleasing, and making it work for everyone, all or none. We default to worrying about what people will think of us. We default to actually fear and guilt. And these behaviors were learned in medical training. Many of us have many of them, and it's why we go into medicine. We are inherently giving people who want people to be happy with us. We don't want to disappoint. We're exceptional people pleasers. We are actually, many of us, driven by fear and guilt, and that's what got us to where we are. And so these thought patterns stick. And in training, they are really sealed in with threats of all kinds of scary things happening. And so when I work with people, really think about, okay, well, what are these patterns? Which are the ones that really cause you the most pain and suffering? And can you step out of them and choose to make decisions from a place of self-worth and from a place of valuing yourself? Maybe instead of coming from self-sacrifice, you come from a place of caring. And so I want to speak a little bit here about my talk. And my talk that I spoke to this leadership group is actually all about this from a slightly different perspective. And that when I had to step up and pitch this talk and give a description of what it's actually about stepping out of these default thought patterns that are learned in training and learning to make decisions and learning to show up intentionally from different energy, a different space, and that we don't want to be making decisions from fear and guilt. We want to be making decisions from authenticity. We want to be making decisions from alignment. We want to be making decisions from a place of caring. in medicine, we were sort of taught that the only place to make them is from self-sacrifice and from scarcity. But what if you believed in yourself? You believed in your practice or what you were offering. You believed in your talk if you're a speaker. You believed in your impact. You believed in your value. That is actually a very different space. And so when I give this talk, I like to think about it not as a lecture or not as me just talking, because when we talk about this, and many of you may be noticing that physiologically we get anxious. And when we get anxious, we start to not to be able to absorb as much of the information. And so very much letting go of deeply rooted thought patterns also involves a somatic component. It involves physiology. It involves a very healthy parasympathetic nervous system. It involves not just understanding what self-compassion is and telling people to practice it, but actually practicing it. And I will say that, in a talk, one can only do a small bit, but you can give people a taste of what it feels like. And when people have begun to feel what self-compassion feels like, what hand to heart feels like, what dropping into mindfulness feels like, they don't forget it. And so one of the things that I see time and time again when I give this talk is that once people get a glimmer and they get a glimmer of that feeling, they want more. And I've literally had people in the middle of a talk sign up for a consult because they're like, she gets it and she has some solutions and I'm ready. That doesn't always happen. Some people then go listen to this podcast for a year and then they come to coaching and they say, I've been listening and now is the time and now I'm ready. And for many people, they don't know if they're ready. They just know that they don't want to feel the way that they want to feel. Or when they hear this, they say, wow, I realize now I'm rooted in all of these old thought patterns and I do not want to move through the world making decisions from a place of guilt and fear. I would much prefer to be making decisions from a place of alignment or hope or inspiration or creativity. Anything is actually better than making decisions from guilt and fear. So I really like to think that it is actually possible to shift from feeling like a victim or feeling stuck, feeling like you don't have any agency, to feeling like you have agency. And it's actually possible in 1 hour of a talk to get a glimmer of that. And once you've had that glimmer, most people want more. And that's the impact of something. So also remembering that it isn't, many people say like, oh, well, it's a time thing. And if I'm going to see this patient or this client for an hour, it's this much money per minute. It's not about that at all. Think about your value as the impact that you make on people's lives. What changes do they make? What benefits do they get from their life by working with you? And I want to offer that even if you don't charge for things, maybe you work for a big HMO, you still want to value yourself and you still want to be rooted in your self-worth and you still want to be believing in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will either. And so whether we're charging or not, you want to act and stand as if you are. And I think this is one of the big disconnects, having worked for a big HMO. The people who are coming in feel like they're actually paying for that visit. They pay tremendously high premiums. We just have this middleman. And so those of us providing the care often don't connect to it in that way. And so I do think there's tremendous value here. And I find myself here, even as I say that, having a little bit of a cringe because the way I was trained to think that like, oh, here I am providing value that someone else is getting and it's worth that someone else, makes me very anxious. In medicine, I was deeply, deeply, strongly rooted in this idea that you as an individual didn't matter. You were there to serve. I was there to take care of the children. But I will offer is when I believe in my worth, when I believe in my value, and even if you when people are pay, they value your time and they actually get better outcomes out of it. So if you believe in yourself, your patients will also believe in you. And if you believe in yourself enough to charge, if you're having to choose your own rates, patients will also believe in you to that degree. And if they've invested in it, they believe in themselves. And so while we very often think that this is unrelated, it's actually not. It's incredibly important. And the ripple effects of shifting your mindset here and the ripple effects of being aware, whether you become aware through coaching, whether you become aware through listening to one of my talks, whether you become aware by listening to this podcast, the change is really magical. And when I am speaking to others about the value that I provide, I have really leaned into also what do they care about? What do they see as valuable? And that's also really important. So you're not just valuing yourself, you're recognizing what other people value and making sure that you see that as part of your value as well. And so I see my value as retention. Almost every physician who works with me actually stays at their job. Not everyone, but many of them may switch jobs but stay in medicine. They find a way to keep doing what they work so hard to do because they inherently love it. Some people will go off and start their own practice or their own niche practice. And that's where oftentimes these issues of what to charge come up. Many people might switch from clinic to hospitalist. Many people might make slight changes, but they're still staying doing what they love. Because when you clean up your mindset, when you connect to your value and your worth, it feels so much better to do what we do. We no longer feel like a victim. We drop into agency. And when we have agency again and we feel a value, the work feels so much better. It's much more sustainable. It feels energizing and rewarding. We're actually doing the same work, but we feel better about it. So I'm often asked, well, how do I figure out what to charge? Or I'm usually asked, what do I charge? And I can't tell you what to charge because I think that across the country, the rates are different. And even for different people, what they offer is very different. And I think in medicine, we want there to be a right way and a wrong way. And there's not a right way and a wrong way. So the way that I like to think about it is that you want to set your fees or your rates, whatever you're doing, from a place of love and alignment. And I get that that feels woo. But to me, if I chose a number that wasn't coming from a place of love for me, for my family, for the sustainability of what I do, for my clients, and for the world at large, I would feel out of alignment. For some people, peace might be the word. So, how much would peace charge? And what I mean by peace is, can you sleep at night? And so, really tapping into what does alignment feel like for you, and noticing how you have been conditioned to feel guilty for charging. And literally in medicine, we've been trained to feel guilty for charging at all. And while I do believe that healthcare is a human right, we don't want to be devaluing the work of the people in the system, which has become a pretty big systemic problem, that people are not valuing the wisdom and expertise of healthcare providers. They're valuing Google. And that's not just because it's more convenient. We've actually taught people not to value us because we're always available and we don't value ourselves. And so I feel strongly that this idea of valuing yourself, tapping into your self-worth, and believing in yourself is absolutely essential to change the culture of medicine, to change the culture of patient care, and to allow people to practice and stay in this field sustainably. So the way that I like to figure it out, and this is just sort of a framework that has come up when many people who've worked with me have asked, is to really do it as a gut intuition type thing. And what I'll say is and oftentimes you don't know until afterwards, but if you feel resentful when you're finished doing something, so if you fly across the country to give a talk and you gave the talk and you gave it your all and you did an amazing job and you got such good feedback, but you're like feeling resentful, like, wow, I overgave. Like this was really a lot of work for me. I took many days out of my other work to do this, or even just energetically, then you probably undercharged if you feel resentful or bitter. That's a really helpful clue. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It's just a clue that, like, wow, you weren't quite spot on. If you feel uneasy or you feel like, oh, that just doesn't feel good, that's often a sign that you overcharged. And so what I like to do is think about, now this is where maybe there is a just right, or it's a little bit like Goldilocks, right? So where you feel grounded, where you feel calm, where you feel, I like this word kind here, because kind is honest, where you feel reciprocity, which I talked about in the previous podcast, where you feel like you gave and they received, and you received and they gave, and everything feels pretty simpatico. That is where the right price is. And this right price is also sustainable. And so for many of us, none of this pricing thing feels good. And we never get to a place where we have this gut intuition where we feel peaceful because it's a practice. And most of us haven't practiced it. Most of us have worked in systems where someone else figures out the price and we have no idea. And we are just the person in the middle providing the care. And so then I would say that a right price also allows you to serve sustainably. And that isn't just a money thing, it's an energetic thing. So if you can continue to show up day after day, and I will actually liken this to my retreats. Like when I do retreats, the amount of work I put in is incredible. I do 12 hours a day, I'm on the whole time, and it takes time before to prepare and time afterwards. And I now actually have hit the spot where I feel like I give everything I've got. And I feel like it's a reciprocal thing. People leave never feeling like they overpaid, feeling like they got more than they paid for. I feel like I gave more than they paid for, but it's also sustainable. It feels to me like something I can keep doing and I want to keep doing it. And that is what I'll say is like the right place allows you to serve sustainably. It allows you to serve from a place of wanting to give more and wanting to share your value and your expertise and feeling like you are valued. And so it's you when you feel a value, other people value you, and you get that reciprocity that feels so amazing that adds into sustainability and ongoing energy. And so the way that I like to think about it is pricing is about alignment. It's not what the market says. Many people are like, well, what will the market bear? It's not what insurance reimburses. It's really what feels aligned for the value that you bring. And strip away all that noise. Strip away the economy, the politics, the fear. And I think the best measure is choose what lets you sleep well at night. Choose what lets you feel calm and grounded and at peace. I also want to reflect that I do believe that undercharging has a hidden cost. One, undercharging is not sustainable, and people who are undercharging generally burn out. A few years ago in my coaching practice, I was absolutely undercharging. And when you undercharge, you get a lot more clients, but you can't actually give the experience that you want. You can't actually give them what they need because you don't have the energy. And so you have to find that place that works. But undercharging also devalues your expertise. And I think that in pediatrics, this is in large part what we've done. We have gone along with this, and we are not valued as experts. We are not really considered in the hierarchy of medical professionals. We're kind of at the bottom, even though we're actually taking care of people's most precious resource. And so I do believe that undercharging lowers your confidence, devalues your expertise, and actually devalues the experience. It also generally brings in people who are misaligned with what you want to do. And in something like coaching and in medicine, you do really want to bring in people who want to change and are really interested in what you have to bring. And this is particularly true for people doing, direct primary care or concierge practices. But I think it's also true energetically, even if you're not charging, if you're really thinking about what you are bringing and what people are bringing to you. And so I think that if you feel resentful, you can't sleep, that's a hidden cost of undercharging. We also model our behavior for our colleagues, for our kids, for trainees, and for our patients. And so we want to model valuing yourself, valuing your time, believing you're worthy, believing in yourself. And so I think that's a cost of undercharging when we don't do that and when we don't feel valued and we don't model for people that there's a hidden cost there. When we don't have boundaries, i.e. we overgive and undercharge, it actually also has a hidden cost. And I like to say boundaries are there to keep the good in, and having an aligned sense of your value and what you offer is also there to keep the good in. When you don't have the boundaries, it all just sort of seeps out and mushes together, and everything is cloudy and murky. And so for many people who come to me for coaching, they feel murky in their life. Their boundaries are murky, their situation is murky, and generally their self-worth is murky. the value ratio in the way that they're working in either their family or their work, and really their internal value ratio is murky. And so having good boundaries and having clear sense of your worth and your value, what you bring, what your expertise is a really powerful stance that opens up all kinds of possibilities. And a reminder that you can also always be flexible. You can offer pro bono or a sliding scale, but do it from intention. Don't do it from obligation. Do it for a specific reason that's aligned. Maybe you have a separate clinic. Maybe you volunteer. Maybe there are all kinds of things that one can do to give back. And so recognizing that we also don't just give back in medicine. Many of us volunteer in all kinds of other places. I give back. I've been teaching free yoga weekly for 5 years. This podcast is free. And so I give back in all of these places. And so you just have to do what feels good to you, not from obligation, but from intention. When you make that distinction, it's a much more powerful place to live. And so when you own your worth, everything shifts. The people who are most successful believe in the value they offer. They believe in the value they offer as physicians. They believe in the value they offer as a speaker. They believe in the value they offer as a coach. And they actually offer more because they believe in themselves. When you go up feeling like an imposter, that you aren't really worth the value, you give a totally different talk. You give a totally different coaching experience when you believe in yourself and you know your value and you know that what you do leads to an impact. And I'm saying this over and over again because everyone in medicine knows this is true about what we do. It actually has a bigger impact. And that I truly don't know physicians who overcharge. And I would say, in fact, the ones who worry about overcharging, you're the ones that are not overcharging. I know that out there is all kinds of fraudulent stuff. But generally, I would hope they're not the people listening to this podcast. And they're not the people who come to work with me. And they're not the people who ask this question. So can you sleep at night? Do you feel valued? Does it feel reasonable? Is it sustainable? And what I mean by sustainable, I also want to point out, sustainable is not suffering. It's not struggling. More suffering is not more valuable. It's sustainable from a peaceful place, a place where you are giving and receiving. So recognizing this value of believing in yourself and believing in your worth and believing in your expertise, and recognizing that when you do sink into this, your practice changes. You can move forward from a place of peace. And for most of us, we can keep doing the practicing what we love, whether it's medicine, whether it's coaching, whether it's providing medicine for the practice of medicine. Recognizing that this belief in ourselves is where the power and impact come, and that scarcity, fear, and guilt do not lead to success. Believing in yourself leads to success. Valuing yourself leads to success. Leaning into your worth and your expertise leads to success, not only for you, but for all of those who you work with. That seems like a beautiful spot to end this episode number 250. Remembering that you are of value, you bring worth, you have expertise, and you bring to this world things no one else can. And so if this episode resonated, please share it with a colleague, someone on your team, a trainee, or maybe even your leadership group. And if it's still too edgy a topic, for many, this is self-worth and valuing and charging are a very edgy topic. Listen to it again, sit with it, be kind to yourself, show yourself compassion, recognize where your thoughts and feelings stem from, and you can decide that you might like to move forward differently, that has served you well until now, and maybe you would like to show up in the world with a different energy. So if you are struggling to charge what you're worth, to feel of value, to hold your boundaries, to believe in yourself, this is absolutely a sign that you should Join me for coaching, one-on-one, small groups. We talk about this stuff all the time. You should consider joining a retreat. And if you want to sort of share a more powerful global message, that talk that I have is really powerful. So you can invite me to come speak to your team. It really is a transformative experience when a full team or full medical staff hears the same messaging and is understanding these same frameworks from which we come. And what's the impact? When are those frameworks helpful? And when do we want to move forward from a more discerning place of agency? And a reminder that this talk is not just about pricing and charging, and it's not just about feeling comfortable pitching yourself. It's really about possibility and power and purpose. Thank you guys so much for listening. We are extremely grateful that many of you have stayed with us over 250 episodes. We would be extremely grateful if you would please, please, please leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. They really help other people find us. And we have put a ton into the last 250 episodes. A ton of effort, energy, time, and even money. It costs effort, costs money to get things edited and uploaded and things like that. And so we would love to be able to share this passion project with many more people. Imagine the ripple effects of medicine if we finally stepped out of the scarcity mindset, attention bias that we have in medicine, and moved into belief in ourselves, belief in our value, and belief in possibilities. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We encourage you to dive into the show notes for each episode for more learnings and resources.
We also invite you to take a listen to the many other Mindful Healers podcast episodes, and please share the podcast far and wide with colleagues, friends, and family.
If our message and approach resonate with you, we would love to work with you.
When you listen to a podcast, you consume information, but when you work with us, you can actually practice and change.
We offer coaching and mindfulness experiences, talks, workshops, retreats, and more. Connect with us at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
The content of this podcast is not medical or life advice. We invite you to participate in the mindful moments we offer at the end of most of our podcasts, but please only do so safely.
Welcome to today's mindful moment, a moment to relax in when you're feeling stressed. Very often, conversations such as the one we just had about money and scarcity and valuing yourself and worth and self-worth and believing in yourself bring up stress. This moment is a moment to relax, bringing two hands to heart, a physical practice of self-compassion. Press the bottom hand into the heart space, rub the top hand on the bottom hand, releasing, melting some cortisol, enjoying that skin to skin, and reconnect with your breath. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. We'll take 3 deep breaths together. If it's safe to close your eyes, do that. And just letting the calm waft through you, seep into every nook and cranny. Let it feel good. And just take a moment to send yourself some compassion for the challenges of scarcity mindset, for the challenges of valuing yourself, believing in yourself, for potentially an all or none. You're have value or you don't. You're worthy or you're not. What if there isn't an all or none? It's complicated. We're all just doing the best that we can. We're learning and growing. But to allow for a moment the possibility that valuing yourself, believing yourself, and leaning into your self-worth might make a difference. It might allow you to bring more value. It might allow you to open up to all kinds of possibilities. It might allow those you work with to experience unprecedented change. When you believe in yourself, you model for others that they can believe in their selves. Letting that sensation percolate through you. What if simply by trusting and believing in your own value and your own worth, that you have something to give? But that in and of itself helps others feel the same way. And when we all feel that way, what could become possible? Pressing that heel of your hand into the heart space, releasing a bit more oxytocin, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Lowering hands and opening eyes if they're closed. Thank you all so much for practicing with me today. May you all have a beautiful day, believing in yourself, valuing yourself, and encouraging others to do the same.